Instead of creating a file from scratch, we'll duplicate the login form because the search form needs very similar elements to what we defined on the login form. We won't be working with buffer, so let's remove that reference. We also won't have an image on the form, so we remove that. And the same for the activity indicator over here. Now we change the name of the component to search and go down to where we export the component. And also change that to search. We won't be needing the state variable over here, so let's remove that. We can also clean up the render function a bit by removing this stuff at the top. We also don't need this image reference anymore, so we delete that. The same for this text element. Okay, we want to keep the first text input. We're going to be using that for the search query. But let's remove the second one over here. So we basically just keep the text input and the touchable highlight and nuke the rest of the stuff. So we remove this error handling code and the activity indicator code over here. Now let's modify the text input to work for search. We change this handler code over here to set a search query state variable instead. And also update the label to say search query. On the touchable highlights on press event, we call the onSearchPressed function instead. We'll rename the onLoginPressed function soon. We also need to change the text of the search button to search instead of login. Now we need to rename this function to match what we used in the touchable highlights on press event. So we change this to onSearchPressed. We can just clear all this out. Let's keep this console log statement, but log out a new message. Let's change the message to say attempting to search for, and then the search query state variable. Down here in the style definition, I quickly remove these unneeded styles here. Let's change the style rule to be called input instead, and up here reference it by the new name, input. Okay, we need to display this view in our app now. To do this, I open the app container file, which we created earlier to contain our tabs. At the top, below where we pull in the component for the feed tab, we duplicate this require and require our new component. Down here in the second tab, we add a Navigator iOS component by duplicating the one over here that we set up for the first tab. Now we quickly change the component to the search component and the title also to search. One last thing we need to do in the search component before we run this. We need to increase the padding of the container view because we're going to render this component in a Navigator component now, which takes up a bit of space at the top here. When we test that, clicking on search, it brings up the new component and it looks good. When I bring up the debugger, you can see that when I type in here and press the search button, it logs the value out to the console.